Previously on Proteus Reef.
I am trying to show you that there is no ammonia detectable on the Red Sea ammonia test kit. So imagine my surprise when this sample, which came from this bucket of pure RODI water, does not match up with the Seneye, which is reporting that this same sample is 0.02 NH3. So there's no chloramine, no chlorine, no nothing coming through. So where did all this ammonia come from? I don't think it came from anywhere. I don't think that there is any ammonia. I think that this Seneye is just garbage. I was saying that I broke the sensor because I put it in RODI water. And that's horseshit as well, because as soon as I put it back in the tank, it started doing all kinds of weirdness and then goes back to giving me the same exact reading that it had been giving me for the last several weeks. Okay, if I'm getting one result before I screw around with it and one result, the same result after I screw around with it, then my screwing around with it didn't break it.
And now the conclusion.
Well, as you can see, not much has changed in the tank in the past month. And that is unfortunate because I was supposed to be able to get fish this month, but that did not happen. Hey folks. So, last month and leading into this month was supposed to be my 6-week period without any fish. And I am now, as of this recording, at 2 months without any fish. And the Seneye is still reporting that I have ammonia in the system, which is preposterous. But that's what it's telling me, and that's what I'm relying on. It might not have even been ammonia that was killing the fish, but to have 4 fish dying randomly like this, it certainly seemed to hint towards that. I did see an ammonia spike after the second fish's death, so I thought that was probably related, but I honestly don't know. Nobody can tell me exactly what's going on. Everybody's telling me that my current ammonia level is fine, and Seneye is telling me that my current ammonia level is fine. But it's right at the edge of what everybody thinks is fine. And that's troubling. So I'm doing all of my tests. I'm really trying to make sure that I'm staying on top of this, figuring out what's going on in my water chemistry. And my nitrites have come down to almost imperceptible amounts in the parts per billion. And still, I haven't gotten over this fear of killing fish, so I haven't bought any new fish. Everybody's telling me it's safe, but I'm feeling like I'm just gonna give it a little bit longer. The tank is doing great without any fish right now. All the coral are doing fine, but I don't want to kill any more fish. I still really do want to have fish in my fish tank. This has been such a great experience having a fish tank right next to where I work all day long, because I can look over here and just chill out. Crab crawling around right now, and I'm just seeing the Duncans bouncing around happy in the waves. It's great to have this here, and I think that having fish here would be even more awesome, but I don't want to watch them slowly die. So, to get to this point, I had thought that by now we would have a definitive answer from Seneye. If you watched the last video, they were going to send me this slide, and we were going to do all kinds of science and figure out exactly what's going on. And they sent me a slide, and I put it in, and it was telling me that I actually had more ammonia than the last slide was telling me. So they did some tests on the unit, did some debugging and stuff like that. It was all invisible to me. They could just be making the shit up. But they told me they did some extra tests, and they believe that the readings are accurate. But that doesn't explain why Red Sea's tests are showing that they've got 0 ammonium, because 0.02 ammonia should be visible as 0.2 ammonium. So that's well within the spec for Red Sea's test kit. I should be getting some kind of result if I've really got that much ammonia in there. So I don't know what to think, right? You spend all this money on this insurance policy, and that's the way I justified this expense myself. It is a big expense. It's $200 for this thing, and then you guys pay $11 per month to continue to use it because these slides need to be replaced every month. And to spend all that money and then not have a definitive, okay, it's safe, is disheartening. maybe, okay, it is safe, but I don't know that for sure. You know, like if this was telling me, like some people are saying that a more reasonable reading for ammonia is around 0.005, like as the top end. But other people, including some knowledgeable folks in the community, are saying that you're probably safe up to 0.02, but or 0.0. Yeah, God, it's so confusing when you're getting down into these decimal places. So they think I'm safe. I'm gonna give it a little while longer. Like honestly, I've got so much stuff happening right now that I haven't had time to even get to the fish store. And with Halloween coming up, we're going to be doing some big stuff for Halloween, so I don't want to be dividing my attention between not paying enough attention to the fish and doing some other stuff. So I'm waiting until next month to try again with the fish. And you know, hopefully the fish are going to survive. Like, now, one of the upsides to having no changes in the tank is that also means I'm not killing any coral, which is really nice. Like, there has not been a single loss. I haven't even lost a zoa head. Like, everything's doing well. So that's great. And part of the reason for that is I've been so diligent in all of my testing. I've been really, making sure I'm doing weekly and in some cases many times a week tests to make sure that I'm getting all of my levels stable. All of these coral want stability. So I'm trying to provide that by making sure that I know exactly what's going on in the water there. And one of the ways that I'm providing stability is by managing the calcium through a supplement called Kalkwasser. But to get to know a little bit more about that and why we need it, let's head on to the Science Corner.
Science Corner, Science Corner, Science Corner with Discord.
Yes, science!
Now, once you have your whole nitrogen cycle figured out, you got your phosphates under control, you're not out of the woods yet on water chemistry, because you need to also make sure that you're providing the correct amount of calcium and alkalinity to your corals. Calcium is especially important for any of the stony corals, the ones that have a skeleton, because they need that calcium to actually build up the skeleton. And the way they do this is by breaking apart bicarbonate into calcium carbonate, which is what their skeletons are made of, and you might know it better as the stuff in Tums or any kind of calcium supplement. It's all calcium carbonate. But for it to get to that stage, you need to provide some acid in the water for the corals to break down that bicarbonate into the calcium carbonate. And the way that we measure that amount of acid is called alkalinity. And trying to balance this whole thing out with the calcium and the alkalinity can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So most people keep this really simple. They use a proven two-part system. And there are literally hundreds of thousands of people all across the world using a two-part, which includes calcium chloride with a sodium bicarbonate, and just either manually dose in the amount that your tank is using in a day, or you get a sophisticated doser that will constantly drip in this stuff for you. Now, that's not going to work for me because I ain't got no room for any more stuff in the back of my tank, so I cannot even begin to contemplate putting in another doser. I've got to look for an alternative, and one alternative is Kalkwasser, which most people pronounce as Kalkwasser, and even more people pronounce it as lime water. And this stuff contains the calcium and the alkalinity basically in one mix. And you mix this into any kind of fresh water and you get a calcium hydroxide solution. Now, there's several ways that you can implement this. You just put it in a container and let it drip throughout the day. Because you don't want it to just dump all this in because it's going to spike your pH and kill everything. The slow implementation of this calcium hydroxide is essential. And the way that I've chosen to implement it, and the way a lot of other people do, is through my auto top-off. The tanks are always evaporating some water. So to compensate for the evaporation, you need to maintain that with an auto top-off, a little sensor that automatically kicks on and raises the level of the water so that the salt water gets some fresh water added to it to keep it level and keeps the salinity balanced, which is vital for keeping salt critters alive. So I've already got that sort of system set up. What I've done now is added calcium hydroxide, the Kalkwasser, to my auto top-off reservoir. And finding the correct balance for that is tricky. It took me a long time, and there's a lot of trial and error. You gotta make sure you are testing constantly, or else it will go up, and you're gonna see your alkalinity starting to spike. And I've had to stay ahead of that, like constantly. You know, okay, well that got too high. Now I gotta go back and dial it in, finding the right amount of Kalkwasser in my auto top-off solution, so that I wouldn't overdose the tank. Now, there's extra benefits to using Kalkwasser over two-part. In addition to it being an entirely automatic system that's using stuff I've already bought, it also has a great property where it will cause phosphate to precipitate out of the water. So it becomes little particles in the sand instead of being phosphate in the water, which isn't good for anything. And all of this is happening thanks to some really diligent testing. Like, that's the key here. You can do this as long as you are going to be on top of this. And I'm talking about daily alkalinity tests to make sure that that does not suddenly spike up because you had too much evaporation in a given day or whatever. But once you got it going, it is awesome.
Science Corner, Science Corner, Science Corner with Discord.
All right, I've set up the camera so you can see my setup here. I've got this 2 gallons of fresh water, which are being plumbed up to this pump, which is being controlled by this auto top-off controller, which has sensors in the back of the tank that let you know when your water levels have dropped. And once it drops, this automatically kicks on and says, go to this pump, and this pump starts pumping that water immediately into the back. And it's super fast. This is a really quiet one too. Like, there's some that make this god-awful blaring noise whenever the water levels come down. And the water levels are going to come down many times throughout the day. So that is definitely not going to happen here. This is a nice system. I mean, you can hear it turning on, but it's not blaring beeping noises at you, so that's fine. But in addition to the fresh water and the Kalkwasser in there, I've also got 10 milliliters of vodka, which is a carbon source. Now, this is Skull, which is not fit for human consumption, but it's great for bacteria. The way that carbon dosing works is it's adding an extra food source for the beneficial bacteria, the ones that are involved in the nitrogen cycle. So they're eating up all this, and now they're breeding like crazy, and then they go on to eat whatever it is that you put them in there to eat in the first place. And this works. Like, I know this all sounds crazy, like putting vodka in this thing and then doing all this. It works. Like, my nitrogen and my nitrates and everything are ridiculously low. I test this stuff all the time, and I use the high range of the Red Seed test kit, and it's saying that I've got less than 4 on every single test that I do on this thing. Like, it has varied, but that was when I was trying to find the right amount of carbon dose. And once I found the right levels, it's all been smooth sailing. Like, all of my parameters have been completely stable, and that's just from this setup. Like, I'm not doing any kind of fancy dosing. I'm not manually dosing in garbage. It's all being controlled through natural evaporation. So whenever the water level drops, it automatically gets the carbon, the calcium, the alkalinity, and the fresh water to keep everything smooth. And it's so nice to have that figured out. It was a pain in the ass getting it going, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it took a lot of trial and error, and you do need to stay on top of your tests to find the right amount of all of this stuff. And if you even think about carbon dosing, you really got to do a lot of research, because you can screw up. Like, I screwed up in a few ways. The first being using too much. So I began my adventures in carbon dosing with Red Sea's Nopox, which is basically super expensive vodka. And if you use too much carbon, and that is some seriously like industrial grade carbon, you end up with all of this slime on the glass. It's like a film of slime, and just mats of this stuff in the back of the tank. And this is because the bacteria are growing so fast now. They're developing like these whole colonies of slime. It's really nasty to deal with. It just completely clogged the hell out of my pumps. But as I learned that lesson, I tried to dial it down until the point where I don't even get the film. Like, I get a little bit of the film, but I barely get any of the film in the glass. So be careful with this stuff, and if you're using vinegar, you got to watch out because that will actually drop your pH, and you don't want to drop your pH because everything in there expects the pH to be a pretty stable around 8.3, 8 to 8.3 ideally, and this was pushing me below 8, like it was pushing me below 7.8, so I was like, okay, you know, that's definitely not going to work. That's when I had to switch from vinegar in my auto top off to vodka in my auto top off, because vodka doesn't push down the pH, but it's a much stronger carbon source. So you've really got to do the math. Like, I'm not even going to tell you the math because you need to go do your homework and figure out your thing. Like, don't listen to me and follow me and expect this to work for you. It's not going to work for you. You got to know exactly how much of this stuff you're putting in the tank, or you're going to have the overdose situation like I experienced. So really do your homework if you're going to do this. But if you do this, it's awesome because I don't have to manually dose anything. I don't have to buy any expensive dosing pumps. It's all just happening for me, and it's keeping all of my levels steady, which is glorious. Like, I'm only 3 months into this. Like, this is like pro level stuff right here, and I'm getting it successfully stable at 3 months. I'm so proud of myself. The fact that nothing has changed is actually a blessing in some ways. I also haven't had any coral dying at all. Like, I was having such a problem keeping zoas alive. There was some kind of pest in here that was just eating them up. Like, they completely gobbled up my lime zinger colony, which was devastating because I love that colony. But then it started eating up the Fiji rainbow, and that's like my favorite colony. That was really the line in the sand. Okay, I'm going to extraordinary measures, and I was trying like weekly dips on these corals that had already been dipped before they even went in the tank. I was doing a weekly dip of iodine, and that seemed to be helping. But then when I finally did a dip of iodine and hydrogen peroxide, that did it. Like, whatever that magical combination in alchemy, that did it. The pests or whatever it was that was bothering these has not caused them to shrink up or even lose any heads in like a month and some change. These Fiji rainbows are really hard to capture on film, but they look so fucking cool in real life because they've got this yellow that's super vibrant, but then there's like hints of green in the yellow. Like, it's a really incredible looking zoa in real life, and to have these now fully opening up so I can see that is really gratifying. That's, to me, the big reward for spending the last 3 months trying to get this thing stable. The corals are alive. And the hermit crab has been doing well. He's now had his second molt and seems to be enjoying life in there. He likes to pick on the Duncans because the Duncans get target fed, so he'll come over here and try to grab the food out of them. I've been trying to discourage this. I've got a long acrylic tube that I was like poking at his shell to try to get him to go away, and he just completely ignored that. He's like, fine, dude, you do what you gotta do, I'm gonna do what I gotta do. And he keeps on going after these the little shrimp that the Duncan are trying to eat. So I'm trying to poking him some more, I'm trying to tap it on the glass. He's a troublemaker. He's constantly running around through the zoas, pissing them off. But everything seems to be okay, so I'm letting him keep doing his thing. He's cute to see running around too. You know, just have something alive in here. And he's actually a really cool looking crab. Like, he's got these orange and black arms that look really vibrant and cool. So I'm happy with him. The rest of the coral seem to be doing pretty well, except for the ultra short Goniopora that kind of thinks it's a monopora. I went through all of the extra trouble and expense of adding a second pump to this tank, and that's still not keeping this thing happy. It's still alive, it's still hanging in there, but the parts that bleached out haven't grown back. In fact, they've completely died off. The parts that are still alive are still alive. Like, I haven't seen any additional areas bleaching, so I don't know if the problem was flow and that's now fixed, or if there was some other problem that's fixed. But whatever it is, it's not getting worse, but it's certainly not getting better. The less short but still short Goniopora has continued to be at its current level. Like, it still never extends its arms to the length that it did its first day in the tank, but it seems to be happy and alive. Like, it'll react to any kind of food particles that come near it, so it seems to be eating, and Usually any kind of sign of feeding response is a good one, or at least so I'm told. It seems to be happy there. I'm happy with it there. I hope it continues to do well. Next to that is the Monopora capricornis, which has been doing pretty good. It looks like it's having some amount of growth. Like, I've got to remember where the polyps are and then judge where I see the growth ridge to know if there's any growth, because this is such a slow grower. But it looks like it's growing, and in real life, I know this doesn't come up on film, but in real life, the pink edge is visible and it looks really cool. So I'm very happy with that. I'm glad to see it's happy. And below that is the Stylophora that was also added last month. This is in the same position that I put a bird's nest when I first started off the tank. And I guess it was not, that bird's nest was just not getting enough flow. This Stylophora is getting plenty of flow. It seems super happy. Like, it's changed in color. It's gotten a little darker, which I think means it's not getting enough light. And I'm ramping up the light. You'll see as we look at the rainbow Monopora, that also changed color dramatically. It became a much darker purple, and all of the polyps became orange. And this is probably an indication that it's not getting enough light. Another possible cause for coral to change color like this, especially turning brown, would be if you've got too much nitrate or phosphate in the water. The zooxanthellae are a little critter that runs all over the coral, and this is where the coral gets their color from. These zooxanthellae are photosynthetic, so they eat up the nitrate and phosphate in the water, as well as any light they're getting, and they convert this into energy for the host coral. Now, if you're giving it too much nitrate and phosphate, then the zooxanthellae will just grow out of control, and it tends to cause the corals to brown out. Now, my nitrate has been really low. Like, it's been less than 4 for like the last 2.5 months or so, and my phosphate has also been very low thanks to Kalkwasser. So I'm left to assume that what I'm seeing right now is just the corals not getting enough light, and that definitely could be the case, because this tiny light that I have on it, I've been slowly ramping up the juice on it. You don't want to hit these corals with too much light, or else they're going to, in some cases, just straight up die out. They could bleach, they could die, they could do all kinds of melting is one way that people describe it. Lighting in a nano tank is a little tricky because of the small size. In a much larger aquarium, you could have a really intense light that will kind of peter out as it gets further down. So for corals like the Duncans and the Hammer and the Zoas that don't need a tremendous amount of light, that you just put those at the bottom, and then you put the ones that do like a lot of light, like the Monoporas, up the very top. But I'm working with a much smaller area here, and basically the difference is negligible. So if I'm going to hit the top with a lot of light, the bottom is also going to get a lot of light. So I've been slowly ramping up the light so that everything down here is getting used to this higher level that's going to be matching the needs of the corals up at the top. While we're still looking at the motties, the Monopora stellata, that was the first motty to go in here, has not been doing well. It had some sort of a weird purplish slimy algae on it. It's not cyano, because it was limited to just this one frag, so I have no idea what the hell it was. I took a toothbrush to it and kind of gently scraped that off, or brushed, I should say, and it seems to be alright. That slime stuff didn't come back, but it lost a lot of color. It looks like it's almost bleached, but the polyps are still coming out, so it seems like it's hanging in there. Whatever's going on with it, it's still alive. I hope it's going to pull through. And next to that is the Sophastria, which seems to be doing well as well. It's another one of these ones that's going to be a really fast grower once it gets going, but right now it's trying to find its base, so it's trying to grow out and kind of get secure. And I can see of all these corals, this one has the most obvious growth, because it's slowly encrusting over the plug and getting towards the epoxy that I used to cement it to the rock. So I'm very happy to see that that's growing, and it seems to be happy. It looks so cool. It looks really cool there, and it seems to like the amount of light that it's getting. The Leptocerus that broke the day I got it is also doing well. I think that I can actually see some growth pattern from it. And you'll notice that on the plug there's this new brownishness at the base where it was broken. That's all new. Like, it's looks like it's growing out towards that, because that is also visible on the smaller frag that is up top. You can now see some of this brownish stuff growing out from the break onto the back glass. So that's really good to see. It seems to be very happy. I nearly lost the larger frag that's on the plug. At one point, the new power head was pointed too close to that, like it was pointing directly at that, and I thought that wouldn't be too much of a problem because most people advise that Leptoceras need a lot of flow. So I didn't think anything of it. Then the very next day, I noticed, whoa, that's starting to look weird. What's going on here? It was starting to get this like white film all over it, and I freaked out because oh my god, this looks so cool. I do not want this to die. It's just this awesome metallic orange green thing that is really cool. I want this to live, so I immediately started adjusting the power heads, and once I got it off of direct flow, like it's no longer getting hammered directly, it seemed to do well. Like all that white stuff disappeared within a day. So I'm very happy that I saved that. That's one of the little victories that I'm cherishing right now in this hobby. And last but not least, this hammer is doing well as well. It looks so cool the way it's bouncing around now, especially in the way that I've got the water flow configured. It's not too rough like it was before when it was up on the pillars of rock, and now it's just kind of bouncing around happy, doing its thing. It seems to love its spot. But the biggest grower in here by far is the original Duncan. Like, oh my god, it is so many heads. I've lost track of how many heads. It's hard to do a head count because there's so many of these tendrils now everywhere. And the larger of the little heads are now eating food. Like I've seen them catching any of the brine shrimp or whatever that I feed in there. It's really cool to see that this is doing so well, and it's a real indication to me that I'm doing something right, which I need. I seriously need that kind of positive feedback, especially with all these super slow growing corals that aren't going to be presenting their obvious grandeur for quite some time. It's nice to have at least one thing in here that is growing and happy and ends like a little indication to me, hey Tim, you're doing something right, well done. Yeah, that's really good to have. Part of my reason for doing these videos is to actually document these coral growth, because these are some slow growers. I want to see, have I seen any changes? You wouldn't notice it on a day-to-day basis, but being able to look back is helpful. And one thing that I did notice while I was looking back is, oh my god, I was seriously expecting to have fish in here by now. And I still would really like to have some fish, but I'm trying to exercise patience. It's been 2 months since I've had any fish in here. I'm going to continue to be patient until I'm ready to add fish, but I also sincerely hope that I will be adding fish next month. So we'll see. Take it easy, folks.